Welcome everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you find yourself in the world. My name is Carmen Mazera, and I serve as Executive Director of APSIA, the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs. We're so glad to have your schools as members of APSIA and to have you here today for what I'm sure is going to be a wonderful presentation looking at careers at the IFC. I'm very grateful to our colleague Rudy, Perecin, Mareno for joining us to share his wisdom. As a quick bit of housekeeping, we are going to take your questions as we go through the presentation in the chat box. So after Rudy has completed his remarks, we'll be able to turn to your questions. But as we go through, if something occurs to you, please feel free to put it in there and we will address it later. If you need to have any technical assistance, you can directly message me through the APSIA office listing on the participants list. So with that, I'm delighted to turn the floor over. We will also have a recording of this presentation up on the APSIA YouTube page following this event. So thank you all for being here, and Rudy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Carmen, and a pleasure to be here and speaking with all of you today. My name is Rudy Perecin Mareno. I am originally from Brazil, and I've been working at IFC for close to 2 years now, and I do talent attraction. So basically looking to get the best and the brightest to join the IFC. Let's talk first about what our goals and our mission is. I think that's a good place to start. The World Bank Group, and IFC is part of the World Bank Group, we have two goals. One is to end poverty, and the other one is to boost shared prosperity. Let's talk first about the first goal, about ending poverty. There are currently 754 million people who are on what's called extreme poverty nowadays. Extreme poverty is defined as those that earn less than $1.90 per day. And that's close to about 10% of the world's population. It is estimated that because of this year's situation with the virus, we might get another additional 78 million people who will be joining those ranks, joining extreme poverty because of all the job losses and so on. So there's a lot of work to do to end poverty. Our goal is by the year 2030, so we don't have much more time left for that. The second goal is to boost shared prosperity, and with this, we're really aiming to work with the bottom 40% of the world's population in each country, right? So the idea is that this population may not, if we work together with them, they may not fall ever on the extreme poverty level, right? And we have to think of things like, climate change or natural disasters that may happen, and someone that actually has a decent living. Because there's not enough safety guards may actually fall on extreme poverty. So those are our goals. That's what we do. Obviously, we are the World Bank Group. This is our building in Washington, D.C., the headquarters. But the World Bank Group is really 5 separate institutions: IBRD, IDA, IFC, MIGA, and ICSID. And I'll talk a little bit about each one of this. I'm sure you all know about them, but I'll explain. IBRD is what most people refer to as World Bank. Right? It's the institution that provides loans to middle-income countries around the world. IDA works with those countries that are the poorest of the poor, those that perhaps if we give a loan, they might not be able to pay it with an interest. So we provide interest-free loans or even grants to governments through IDA. IFC does something different. So both IBRD and IDA work with the public sector, with the governments. IFC, we work directly with the private sector, right? We think there's a solution to the world's problems if we work with the private sector and generate jobs and boost exports. IFC is currently the largest private sector development institution in the world. MIGA also works with private sector. They act as an insurance to investors that are looking to invest in a lot of these countries and may be fearful because of political risk or other risks, and MIGA steps in and provides a guarantee. And ICSID is the youngest of the institutions, the 5 institutions, the smallest as well. And it's, as the name implies, it's a center for settlement of investment disputes. So that's the World Bank Group. But let's focus a little more on IFC in particular. What do we do at the IFC? We do 3 things. We invest, we advise, and we mobilize funds. So when we invest, we're obviously providing loans, and that's a large part of what we do. We provide loans to private sector, to companies, to create new factories, to boost exports, and so on. We provide equity as well. So sometimes we'll invest in those companies by actually sitting on their board and whatnot. We do trade finance, risk management, blended finance. When we advise, we work very similar to some of the private sector firms that provide firm level advice, like an EY or PwC. We have, for example, expertise on public-private partnerships because we've done those all over the world. So we provide advice to governments and to private sector institutions that are looking to set those in motion. We also have worked very hard on ESG standards, which are environmental, social, safety guarantees. And for this, we've actually created the standards that most companies use nowadays, so that if there's investment in a hydroelectric plant, the companies are making sure that they're looking after the environment, looking after the local populations. We have a set of questions that are asked that all these companies follow for these investments. And finally, we mobilize funds. So we work with private equity funds that can then boost or loans or provide a better package for solutions around the world. This is a picture of our annual report and what it looks like, so you get a better idea of what industries we're working on. As you'll notice, infrastructure and financial markets make up more than half of our portfolio. When I'm talking about financial markets, that means we're providing loans to banks. But when we're providing loans to banks, we're saying, okay, we will provide a line of credit for you so that you can provide loans to small farmers or to women-owned businesses, right? And that's a way we see a way we can boost development. We work on infrastructure, but you'll see we also work in other areas too: manufacturing, trade finance, health, education, telecommunications. We're moving out of natural resources. We still have part of our portfolio invested on that, but the idea is by the year 2030, so in 10 years, we would have moved out of areas that we used to invest on before in the past, like oil and gas, and moving more towards renewables. So for example, wind and solar. In terms of regional, we're almost evenly divided around the world, but currently we have a large presence in Latin America and the Caribbean. By the year 2030, so on this 10-year strategy, we're looking to have more of our investments in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. And that's because, remember I was telling you about people living below the extreme poverty level. Many of those tend to live in countries in those regions. So that's where we're going to be focusing more and more for the next and upcoming years. But you may be wondering, why should you work with us? And I'll give you 3 good reasons. 1 for the impactful work, 2 for the multicultural workplace, and 3 for the global opportunities. So in terms of impactful work, I think it's really motivating and inspiring to think that we have a group of people that are so passionate about this one goal of ending extreme poverty, right? And we all have the same mentality. We all have the same ambition of, within our generation, seeing a world free of extreme poverty. And we think it's possible. And if you like working in a place that has this kind of goals and ambitions, this is a great place to be. I myself cannot think of anything more important to be accomplished by humanity within this time frame. In terms of multicultural, we're definitely one of the most diverse places you can be. We have over 4,000 employees, 4 separate generations, over 150 nationalities, 120 plus languages. It's fun. You go to our cafeterias and you'll hear people speaking in different languages and sharing foods and experiences from countries they've been. It's a great place to be. I like that international feel, and I think because you all studied international affairs, you probably all desire that. And global opportunities. I may have mentioned we have over 100 country offices around the world. Let me show you a picture here. This is something I took from a year-end report in June of our 4,000 employees and where they're located. And you can see where they're congregated. But you'll also notice that we have some hub offices. For example, Bogota is a hub office for Latin America. Dakar, Nairobi, and Johannesburg are for Africa. And in terms of Asia, we have a big presence in Singapore, and Vienna acts as our hub office for ECHA. So we have over 100 country offices, right? And we encourage people to rotate, right? Don't just stay in headquarters. We want you to move. Or, if you are in a region, let's say you're in Asia, why not take your expertise to Africa, right? So every 3 or 4 years, your manager is going to have that conversation with you. Where's your next goal? What's your next challenge? Where would you like to take your expertise, right? By the year 2030, again, this 10-year strategy, we plan to have about 65% of our staff located outside of headquarters. So that is, we currently have about 55%. So that's an increase of about 10% of our staff moving to outside of our headquarters. So it's either move or we'll probably open a lot more positions. That's where we're going. We're going to be opening a lot more positions outside of headquarters, growing more in our hubs, and in some of these countries where I mentioned before, we'll be focusing on in the future. Now, you may be wondering, how can I join the IFC and really the World Bank Group in general? And I can give you like 4 different doors that you can enter to an internship, to the YP program, to consultancies, and to staff positions. First of all, about the internship, we have a summer internship program. I know it says here the application period is from December 1st to January 15th. There's a delay this year. We're actually looking to make this into a global internship program. Currently, it's just for headquarters, Washington, D.C. So until that decision is made, we're delaying, but most likely we'll open the internship program sometime maybe December 15th or early January. If you visit our page, you'll be able to see it. The criteria is that you must be a current graduate student at the time of internship. So for example, and ideally you would be on your first year of your graduate studies. So if you graduate in May or June or July, which are the summer months, you wouldn't be a student at the time of the internship, so you wouldn't qualify. Sorry, I hear a... Carmen, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I hear a noise. I guess that must be from someone else.
I will double check and make sure everybody is muted.
Okay. Hopefully it's not from mine. All right. So in terms of criteria, must be a current graduate student at the time of internship. That's the only criteria. We hire anything between 20 to 30 interns per year, or internships are paid, and they're all based in headquarters for now in Washington, D.C. The other door is the Young Professionals Program, the YP program. And this is a very, very prestigious program we have. We receive close to 15,000 applications every year. We choose 50 to 60 people. So it's very, very competitive. But these are actually the future leaders of the IFC and the World Bank Group. Or our former CEO, Philippe, who just left this summer, he graduated from the Young Professionals Program back in his days, 30 or so years ago. The idea is, as a young professionals, if you enter into the Young Professionals Program, you'll get to rotate much faster. Basically, you can rotate up to once a year on the first 3 years that you enter into the Young Professionals Program. So, for example, you might start in headquarters. You might choose to do a little more field work, perhaps in Johannesburg, and then you might want to then rotate for your 3rd year to our offices in Singapore, and you can do that and do more of original work there. Or maybe you can move across different industries and learn from those industries and just broaden your expertise. The only criteria is that actually there's three main criteria points. You must be born after October 1st, 1988, so you must be younger than 32 years of age. You must have completed a master's degree or a PhD, right? And at least 4 years of experience. So that's the criteria for the Young Professionals Program. We've merged this program recently with the program of Young Professionals for the bank. So It's one single program now. The application period is two periods this year. June for World Bank, MIGA, and other institutions. We launch a second application period in August to September for those more interested in the private sector. And we plan to probably keep the same application period for next year too. Perhaps an easier door to use to enter into IFC and World Bank Group is through consultancies. And at any given time, we have about 1,000 consultants working at IFC. Now, when you see a position advertised, how do you know if it is a consultancy or not? Typically, a consultancy will have these acronyms, STC or ETC. STC stands for short-term contract, and ETC stands for extended term contract. So the short-term contracts tends to be 90 days to 150 days. ETCs tend to be between 1 year to 2 years. And obviously they're renewable. So what do consultants typically do? They do a variety of things. So for example, let's say we're working on a report. We need someone to help us with some graphs for that report. We'll hire a consultant, right? Perhaps we need to do a market research. Let's say we're moving into the field of electric vehicles, right? And we're looking to finance that. We need some sort of market research. We might hire a consultant to help us with that. So there's different kinds of opportunities that you'll see as consultancies being advertised. And finally, staff vacancies. The good thing about IFC is that we're still on an expansion phase. We have planned to open 250 new vacancies this year. And these are new vacancies. These are not staff replacement. These are brand new positions. The grade levels that you may be interested in pursuing are those at the GE and the GF level, right? On the GE level, you'll see positions with the title analyst. So it could be anything analyst. It could be investment analyst, could be operations analyst, could be HR analyst. So those are the GE grade. Typically for a GE level, we require a bachelor's degree and at least 3 years of experience. So that's what's required for a GE level. If you have more than a bachelor's degree, if you've completed your master's degree, then I would suggest you apply for these other two roles, either as associate officer or as officer. Again, put any title into it. So an associate risk officer or, for example, an investment officer, right? For those two positions, for the associate officer level, you must have a master's degree and at least 7 years of experience, 5 to 7 years of experience. Some people have closer to the 7 years mark. And at the officer level, you need to have a master's degree and closer to 10 years of experience. So 10, 12, typically is what I see from candidates that get selected. Locations. These can be anywhere, headquarters. Like I said before, we're going to be expanding a lot more outside of headquarters. So more positions you see advertised outside of our country office or in our country offices. So let me give you a few tips that may help you as you're looking to apply and learn more about IFC. First, use this opportunity to ask questions. I'm here. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. I do long listing. I do short listing. I sit on the panels. So whatever you want to know, I'm happy to answer. I also suggest that you sign up for job alerts. So you go to our webpage. You don't have to go every single day looking for a job. You can just set up a job alert and say, okay, I'm interested in internship. So next time there's a position that's an internship that's published, you will automatically receive a notification about that position. I also suggest you follow us on LinkedIn. And the reason why I say that is because for consultancies, you won't see those typically posted on our webpage. Departments tend to post consultancies on LinkedIn. So if you follow us there, you'll be able to receive those notifications there. While you're on LinkedIn, I suggest that you build connections there. So see who you're connected with and try to make connections, friends, I guess, on LinkedIn. And I have a slide about it, and I was giving this presentation earlier to a group of students from Wharton. And I said, what you do is you go to IFC, go to the tab that says people, and then you can type anything here. In their case, they typed Wharton, and then you see, okay, there's 113 employees that either went to Wharton or have something in their profile that says Wharton, right? And you'll see many in Washington, D.C. So maybe you can network with those there, and you'll see a list of who they are. So that's a good way to find people. You can also read or reviews on Glassdoor, and Glassdoor I find a really fantastic tool for job seekers, especially because you'll get to see what comments people have that are working currently at IFC, about the culture and people and everything. But you also get to see perhaps people that have gone through a job interview. They'll write, okay, these were the questions that were asked to me in the job interview. And this kind of knowledge is good. If you only have 2 or 3 minutes of your time, we have a YouTube channel. You can watch a video about a project, and that way you'll learn. Same thing, we have a podcast. The podcast is called Climate Biz, and runs about 20 minutes. But it's a good way to learn more about IFC. And why do I say this? When I sit on interviews, it shows someone who doesn't know much about the institution versus someone that is well informed, knows about our projects, knows about the latest things we've done. So the more informed you are, the better I think you will show at an interview. And finally, I suggest you take trainings if you have time. We have free trainings available at the Open Learning platform, World Bank Academy. Look for those. Maybe you can learn about our project financing cycle. If there's 2 CVs that are identical, but this one has actually taken a training with us and knows about our project cycles, hey, maybe that's the one I want to hire, right? So just these are a few tips I have for you. So with that, that's the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rudy, so much for all of that great information. And thanks to all of you for already teeing up so many great questions in the chat box. I'm going to do my best to group everything to make it a little easier for Rudy to answer. Rudy, we have a number of questions about the internship program. So let's start there. What kinds of qualities do you usually look for in interns, and what kind of work do interns typically complete?
Okay, so interns will do 3 things, I would say. They will do a little bit of market research. They may get to shadow a deal that's going through our due diligence process, right? So they'll get to shadow, let's say it's a hydroelectric plant, right? They'll get to shadow it from the very start, going through different committees, through the environmental, through legal, through risk, right? And seeing what are the questions that are being asked. I think it's great exposure they have. What kind of background do interns have? I would say people that have been selected for the internship program usually have that kind of background already. So they've already gone through processes where in their work experience in the past, they would have done due diligence, done market research. They have good skills at financial modeling, for example. So those are the skills we're looking for. In terms of degrees, backgrounds, it could be anything. I've seen people who have maybe lawyers, but they do very well at these things that I just named.
Great, thank you. And in terms of what counts as work experience for the positions that have some requirements for prior work experience, for the internships, could you repeat about how many years would be required, and would you unpack a little bit what counts? Does an internship count? Does a PhD program count? What counts towards that overall number?
I should say our internships are competitive. So typically those that are selected for the internship program have at least a couple of years of experience. So 2 years of experience or so. It's very common. And those 2 years of experience would actually be actual experience working in a firm, sometimes maybe blended with a previous internship, but most likely having worked on development projects themselves.
Great, thank you. A few other questions, and thanks to all of you for keeping them coming. I'm going to do my best to pick among all the things. In terms of the dates for the internship program, just to clarify, the application period that folks can see on the screen may not be the exact dates for this year.
Correct.
So will the January 15 deadline still be hard and fast,
For sure.
even if the start date is?
Yeah, for sure. For sure, January is when we're going to publish it. Like, it could be the 15th of this month. It could be the 30th of this month. It could be early January. That's still to be defined. So I wish I had a better answer of when the exact date will be. But what I would suggest is sign up for job alerts, and you'll know the moment it's published. You will receive a notification.
Sounds good. For the YPP program itself,
Yeah.
what kinds of experiences are you looking for, and what really helps a candidate stand out?
Yeah, so the YP program, because we've merged the YP program together with the bank's YP program, it used to be two separate ones, one for IFC, one for bank. What we want now is actually a combination of the two. And this is very difficult to get. So people that have experience working on private sector, and people that also have that same experience working with governments, right? It's not something you find every day. So, for example, working with the private sector, what it takes to get an investment to have, let's say, a new factory in a certain place. But you've also worked with government counterparts, so you know what steps are needed to remove barriers. Maybe these are legal barriers or regulatory barriers that would be necessary to get something to happen. The reason why I say this is because there's this big movement lately at IFC, something we call the upstream, right? And upstream is really okay. Let me explain. Let me back up a little bit. So it's very easy for us when a company approaches us and says, "Hey, we have a great, fantastic project in Madagascar. Can you guys finance it?" That's very straightforward. Then we can take that company forward and invest in it, get the proper funding, etc. For some of these countries where we're going to be working on now in the future, right? And these are the poorest of the poor. They may have a country that's conflict. They stay poor because of conflict, because they don't have a stable government, etc. It's more challenging, right? So we need people that can think a little bit more outside of the box and think, okay, how can I make this investment happen? How can I partner with the government or whatever temporary government there is to make this investment happen? And to someone that perhaps comes straight from Wall Street, has never seen any challenges in the emerging markets in the developing world, they wouldn't be able to know how to navigate. So that's why we want to have people that have this new blended experience and would be able to move between institutions and bring the two together. And if I may expand a little bit more, maybe I'll tell a quick story if we have time about an investment in Haiti that I think talks a little bit about our upstream investment and the mentality behind it. So Haiti had an earthquake. We all know about it over 10 years ago. And what we learned from that experience was that a lot of the private sector in Haiti could not bounce back, right? They couldn't bounce back, or it took too long for them to be able to rebuild whatever was destroyed. And if they just had the right access to insurances, maybe they would be able to tap some capital that would have helped them, right? Obviously, the main problem we saw with that was that the regulatory framework that Haiti had was not very friendly towards insurance companies, right? It was very difficult to set up and run insurances. And as a matter of fact, I think very few, if not any, major insurance company was present in Haiti. So we sat down and thought, okay, if we bring our experts from the bank side, from the World Bank, let's think of how can we approach the Haitian government and see if they're willing to do this certain regulatory changes. Would they be able to then open up an industry? And then IFC could bring in the private sector. We could bring in large companies to be able to fill the void and the need. And that's exactly what we did. So, it's the bringing together all of this that makes upstream work, and that's the kind of mentality and the kind of solutions we want to have people that apply to the Young Professionals program bring.
That's great. That's such a great example of the different kinds of expertise that need to come together.
Mm-hmm.
For this new approach where the bank group and the IFC YPP are together, do students just apply to YPP overall, or do they apply with a specificity for IFC, and can they move between the two organizations with their application? How does all of that work out now?
So what I've suggested to people is actually apply to both. So when it opens up in June, when it opens up in June, you can apply there, and they will be reviewing those profiles that have the right background for IFC. And when it opens up in August, you can apply again, and you will still be considered on both occasions. So that's what I've been suggesting to people.
Thank you. And for things like YPP and even the internship program and consultancies, could you talk a bit about the visa requirements that would be needed to come and work at headquarters?
Okay, so in terms
or
of
any of the
visa,
offices?
no, in terms of visa, the World Bank Group has an agreement where, in a way, very similar to the UN. We have something called the G4 visa. And the G4 visa is a visa that allows you for you and your spouse to work and live in the United States, your children too, if you have children. So it's different. For instance, in the United States, it's different from the H-1B visa, right? The H-1B visa. I actually used to have the H-1B visa. It's a visa that allows you to work, but not necessarily your spouse. With the G4, you and your spouse can work, and it's a very cool visa because it's a semi-diplomatic visa in a sense. For example, on the G4 visa, traveling to the United States, there's usually 3 lines. There's like a line for citizens, a line for tourists, foreigners, and there's a small door for diplomats. And usually that's the door that is open for the G4 visa holders, because you're considered on a diplomatic status, right? You're an international organization civil servant. So if you're hired for IFC World Bank Group, you will get that visa automatically, and it's good for the time, for as long as you're here. So that's what it is. Even if you're on a consultancy, if the consultancy is more than, let's say, just 90 days, the State Department will process it for you, and you'll be able to work in headquarters.
More people to be jealous of as you cut the incoming line at Dulles, I think, is the key there.
And it's fantastic because they don't take a picture of you. They don't have to scan your fingerprints. None of that.
We have a number of questions about process, the application process overall.
Mm-hmm.
Could you walk us through both the formal process, it goes into a computer, the computers do this, or whatever it is, and then would you also tell us about the informal process? I think from the questions, a lot of folks are concerned that the informal is much more important than the formal, and how they can perhaps capitalize on the informal ways in the door.
Okay. Perhaps I'd say both are necessary, right? There's a formal process, and obviously, let me just tell you, every single application is reviewed, right? If you apply to IFC, I can tell you this is how usually the process works. We typically receive maybe 120 or so applications, right? On average. Obviously, some locations receive more applications. So, for example, for whatever reason, Nairobi gets close to 700, 800 people. Same thing with our locations in India. We get close to 1,000 or so people that apply. But really, on average, we get closer to 120, 150 or so. We don't have a computer system that automatically reviews all of those. We actually have people, right? And we have people within my team that will review those applications. and they'll do what's called a long list, right? The long list will be maybe 10% or 15% of those that applied. So in the example I used before, if 150 people applied, maybe 15 will make it to the long list, okay? That long list then is circulated to the panel members. And the panel members can be maybe 4, maybe 3 people, maybe even 5 people that will be sitting on the panel, not usually 5. But they'll review those 15 people that were on the long list, and they'll pick their top 5 or their top 6 to interview. And that's called a short list. And the short list is the one that gets reviewed. Now, I said, do both, right? And the whole process itself takes some time, the World Bank Group. IFC in particular, we took about 122 days on average this last fiscal year. So it's a long process. So just keep that in mind. But why should you do both, right? To do the formal process and the informal process. Obviously, once your resume, once you apply, once your resume gets to that shortlist stage, there will be people that will be reviewing. And if these people already know you, right, or they already know the work you do, maybe they've worked with you as a counterpart on some sort of project in the past, then they'll say, oh yeah, I know this person. I've had good experience working with them, and it's not like it's necessary for you to qualify to apply. They don't need to know you, but if someone already knows you, then that already gives a good impression, right? So that's the way I want to structure it. I know a lot of people talk about networking and think networking brings up opportunities, and it's true. Sometimes team leads, they have the ability to hire some consultants, right, to do some consulting work, and sometimes through networks you may hear about those consultancy opportunities. But just like all the other consultancy opportunities, we'll publish and there'll be people that will apply, and it's still always going to be competitive. So there's always a formal process, but informally, if you can do some networking, that also helps.
You had encouraged students to seek out folks on LinkedIn that might have a common relationship with them. How open typically are IFC staff to cold requests or cold calls to talk about their work?
Yeah, I think if there's a connection, there usually is someone that's open, right? That connection may be someone from your same country, someone from the same school. My experience has been that people are usually very friendly. However, now because everyone's just doing web meetings, I myself have received a lot of requests for virtual coffees. And I just don't know that there's enough time for that nowadays. It's just, I think the speed of work has changed dramatically since we're jumping from meeting to meeting to meeting. So I just don't know how feasible that is. Also, keep in mind the holidays, end of the year, but you can always try.
I think that's a good reminder for everyone to talk to their alumni office, to talk to their career office, and see which doors are the warmest to knock on before a complete cold call.
Yeah.
One other, again, structural question, looking at the interview panels and conversations, is it typically a mix of technical experts and HR, or does HR hand it off to the technical experts? How, could you talk a little bit about that part of the process?
So this is unique, I think, to IFC. We usually just allow departments to sit on the panels on their own. We don't have someone from HR typically sitting on panels. Sometimes they ask for someone from HR to sit on panels, but that's not a requirement. Unless it's a very high level panel, typically individual business managers will just have their own team sit on that panel and reviewing interviews.
Great. Lots of questions, of course, about how best to stand out of the 120 or 1,000 applications that you all might get. So first, are there particular pieces of coursework that you think really help a candidate stand out? We'll start with that one, and then we'll go through some of the others.
Okay, so IFC in particular, we're working with the private sector, right? So I think one skill that's good and necessary is financial modeling, right? And what is financial modeling? Financial modeling is being able to look at a balance sheet, an income statement for a company, and being able to make very simple projections, right? How is this company going to be doing in the next 5 years, right? If we're to invest in that company, we want to know that. What kind of questions do we ask, right? What are the risk factors? So it's a skill in itself. There's obviously courses that can help you understand and learn more about financial modeling and some of the formulas that are helpful in making those decisions. But that's not it. I mean, we're talking here with people who have studied international affairs. I myself have studied international affairs. The bulk of people we hired obviously will have that financial background, but that's not everyone, right? So for example, we'll have someone from, we have people who go to the G20 meetings, right? They don't need a financial background for that. They need more of a diplomatic kind of background. We have roles, for example, we have a very interesting group that's like our watchdog group that handles any complaints that we may get. So for example, from indigenous communities that may feel that they have been displaced, resettled not appropriately, they'll go to this complaint group, right? And I've seen people with backgrounds from international affairs who usually work in this department, and they have a good understanding of working with local communities and being able to get their voices heard and navigating through the whole review process. So yes, although I say most of the positions are financial based, there's going to be a lot of positions that are not. So I'm think of those. We also have, for example, also a strategic thinking group, right? I think it's called Thought Leadership Group, actually. And this is the group of people, a lot of economists, some people who study international affairs as well, sit in this departments. It's more than one. And they think about, what's the future like for certain countries, right? So they'll see Mali. Okay, what are the opportunities in Mali, right? And they'll make these studies. They'll look at the longer term trends, right? We'll have obviously people doing financing and loans, but we'll take a look at the long term trend. And in terms of long term trend, I was saying this 2030 strategy comes from that. We saw a while back that there was a need to invest more in climate related activities, and that's where we pivoted. Thanks a lot to the research that was done by this thought leadership group. So there's different pockets of groups that require different kinds of skills. It's what I'm trying to say.
And you noted that there might be as many as 250 new openings coming in at the IFC. Could you share with us a sneak peek as to where those positions might be opening and where students may be ready to anticipate opportunities for themselves?
So what I can share is that a lot of those positions, because of our strategic goal to have about 65% of our staff being outside of headquarters, a lot of those positions will be outside of headquarters. My guess is that a lot of them are going to be in Africa or South Asia. My guess is that a lot of it is going to be within operations, right? And the positions we most hired this year had to do with upstream, right? So people that brought those skills that I was talking about. We're tending to expand also on the junior level positions, right? So if you think of it as a pyramid, we're not hiring too many people on top. Where we're really mostly growing are at this GE and GF level positions, which are a lot more junior. So this is all good for people that are interested in, starting their career, and they're not afraid of, starting their career in Dakar, for example, because they have the French speaking skills and so on.
That's a great pivot too. Are there particular languages the IFC places a lot of value on?
So obviously English, but apart from that, if you have a regional language, and I'm thinking of Spanish, or Portuguese, and Arabic, Chinese, Russian, uh, French, those are all useful, especially if you think, where your career take you. The languages will help you open more doors for you in your career.
Thank you. We have a number of questions for students trying to figure out how best to capitalize on their degrees that they're going to have. You've talked a little bit about the many great traits that international affairs students can draw out in terms of applicability, maybe regional studies, functional fields. Are there other traits that students who might be focusing on economics or public policy could also highlight in an application for you all?
So I like the idea of policy, right? Because that talks a lot with what we're doing with upstream, right? So if you can manage to be able to see the trends and put those into policy, I think that will open a lot of doors. Economics background is very, very useful, especially at the World Bank. So if World Bank hires a lot of economists, IFC tends to hire a lot of bankers. But being able to manage the two sides, I think, is very useful.
Thank you. As a reminder to everyone, the recording of the presentation will be available afterwards on the APSIA website. We have about 10 minutes left, so if there's a burning question you really need answered, now is a great time to get it in. One of the other questions I've seen has been about soft skills that the IFC might place a lot of value on. Not only what are they, but how students can highlight them in their applications for you all.
In terms of soft skills, I would say two or three things that usually fall into interviews. There's always a need for good communication skills, right? But there will always be a question about values, right? We want to know, how do your values match with ours, right? So if you can look at that, think in terms of your soft skills and your values, how do you fit in? That would be great. The other thing is in terms of mission, right? So how do you fit in terms of the mission? We get a lot of applications from people who have fantastic financial background. Maybe they've worked in some of the financial capitals of the world, like London, New York, but they don't quite get the mission. They haven't been to a country that struggles. I think that makes a huge difference when we're looking at people and evaluating.
And in terms of candidates who've maybe applied a number of times and haven't quite found a way to get noticed yet, because you said every application is reviewed, are there things that really make an application stand out to you in a good way? And if you have a chance, also the things that are huge red flags when you see them that no one in this call should ever do if they would like to get noticed in a good way by the IFC.
Great. So you should try to have a different application every time you apply, right? I think it's very easy to notice people that send generic applications and just submit, and don't think about it. Those are very easy to notice. What I usually say is, grab the job description, use a highlighter, highlight those keywords, make sure those keywords are included in your resume, ideally on a place that's easier to see. Maybe have him somewhere on top, so that right off the bat you get to capture the attention of whomever's reviewing the resume, and then they'll continue reading, right? I think that usually helps. What's a no-no? For us, it tends to be, and I think this comes culturally, but in other countries, resumes tend to be very long. They include everything and every conference the person has been to. That's not necessary. I think 2 or 3 pages is sufficient. Don't include things that are very personal. We don't need to know your marital status, your religion, how many children you have. That's not necessary to be included in your resume. Driver's license number, I've seen those. That's also not necessary. What would be good to add, especially any of you who have done important research, is your publications, right? And that's usually something that I think tends to stand out. People that have publications, especially if the publications are in reputable journals, peer-reviewed reputable journals, then those will be noticed. We want to hire people who bring a certain level of expertise, right? The more fun positions that I've been searching for example, not long ago, I was looking for an electric vehicles expert, right? And this is not something we tend to hire every day, but it's something we're looking to grow, and then we see a market and opportunity for investment. So I was looking for hiring that person that had that kind of expertise. Could be an engineer, could be someone that had a business background. I didn't know, and we were open to finding. It could be someone that had done very, very clear research about the topic and knew a lot about the areas, maybe had published a book. So we're clearly looking to find a person that will show themselves as the expert, but also will be able to bring that into reality. So just someone that knows academia, but doesn't know in practice what a project looks like, tends to be a little disadvantage when they apply.
In terms of folks who might be earlier in their careers than people who are off writing books, and maybe some of you are all off writing books, are there ways to demonstrate that expertise, but at a more junior level? Is it the papers you write? Is it the classes you take? Is it some other things? Be
creative. Like I've seen people who have put their thesis in there, and I think that's awesome because that's also a conversation point, especially if the thesis is very, very related to something we're doing. I would say anything that's related to climate financing nowadays, probably something that people will take notice because that's an area where we're going to be growing in the future.
All right, inside tip for all of you. Few other points of clarification with the time that we have left, just to make sure everybody leaves with the clearest sense. For students who might be graduating in May of next year, you said the average is about 122 days for processing. Yeah. Is there a sweet spot that they should look to apply so that it's not too soon and not too early or too late?
So I see trends, and the trends, think of it this way, they repeat themselves every year, right? So typically January, February tend to be slower months. We won't publish too many positions in those 2 months, but they tend to pick up in April, May. You'll see a lot of positions. That's kind of like a peak, April, May. There'll be a lot of positions available. Tends to coincide, I think, with our fiscal year, which ends in June, right? So a lot of people that still have money, they'll make sure they'll publish their positions before the year ends, the fiscal year ends. Then the summer comes in and tends to be slow at IFC and the World Bank Group in general. So you won't see many positions being advertised in June, July, August. It tends to be like slower months. But then it picks up again, September, October, it's another peak. There'll be a lot of positions that will be advertised back then, and a lot of roles to be filled. And then we come to November, and December tend to be slower months again. December being almost a dead month, very few positions being advertised. And as you can see from our website, very, very few right now.
Excuse me, is it possible to ask a question?
I'm going to ask you, ma'am, to do that all in the chat. We're asking everybody to do this in the chat. Thank you, though. A couple other points of clarification. One is the IFC site says that an MBA is typically required, but you've talked a lot about the applicability of other degrees. Could you talk about some of those specific points?
So our previous CEO, Philippe, he used to say a lot that he wants more engineers working at IFC. He wants a different way of thinking. We need to come up with different solutions. Some of the countries that we're going to be working on in the future, and I'm thinking, Democratic Republic of Congo, Somalia. Those are difficult countries, and we need to come up with different solutions. So he would say that someone with an engineering background would have a different way to think of things. But MBA is not strictly required. Maybe some programs may prefer MBAs, but anyone that has a good background for whatever area department that is, I think they'll be considered. So a lot of finance people apply. They bring the right skills, but like I said before, any degree tends to work as long as they have the right skills, the right experience. I think people that have international development have a few things that are already in their favor. They have the right mission, right? They know they have the right goal in mind, the right values for what we want to accomplish. They have the right perspective, right? It's more of a global perspective, so that's also useful. I think if they can just match it with a little more numerical skills, then that could be a good match for us.
Great. One other point of clarification was whether a PhD would count towards the years of experience that you're asking for.
I see some departments counting that. Remember, I was talking about this thought leadership group. That group tends to hire a lot of PhDs, so they consider it. So it just depends on the role.
Great. I see one or two more people putting their questions in the chat. Also, as a point of clarification, Rudy, all three of the types of positions you talked about, full-time, or excuse me, all four, internships, YPP, consultants, and full-time positions are all on the IFC website. Is that right?
That's correct.
And they all get picked up in job alerts. Is that right?
They should.
Great. So that's an easy way to keep track of all of the different types of opportunities that come through.
Yeah, and now that people know about the grade levels, it's easier to know where you fall in.
Could you repeat again? A GE is for.
Yeah, let me explain that a little more. So, or grade levels are alphabetical, right? They'll start at letter A, then they'll go B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way up to K. K being the president, right? So grade E, which is what we call GE, is that one that has a bachelor's and at least 3 years experience. Grade F, depending on if it's a grade F1 or a grade F2, would have a master's and 5 to 7 years experience or 10 to 12 years experience. Anyone with more than that can apply for a GG, but that's a little more of a senior role.
Do you do a lot of hiring at that level, or do most people come in and go up?
So both. We have a lot of people that do grow within. I've hired a lot for the GG level, but what we're hiring mostly nowadays is GE and GF.
That's great. One last question with the time that we have, and it's about quality of life. Could you talk a little bit about what the lifestyle is like at the IFC compared maybe to an investment bank, where there might be the same sorts of folks running around? And if you had any other thoughts on, and even compared to the other bank family.
Okay, so that's good, and we do get sometimes criticized in terms of work-life balance. And I can say we have hired before in the past a lot of people from JP Morgan, a Morgan Stanley, a Goldman Sachs, right? Investment banks. And typically, these people are very used to working 80-hour weeks, nonstop. And I think they get to a point in their life where they say, why am I doing this, right? Is it just for the money? And that's where they find, there's a purpose to your life and something else you can do. So then they explore coming to IFC. But they still come on that very same pace, right? Of working very hard, very fast. So you'll encounter people that work with this speed. Also, because we're a very global institution, my experience personally has been, okay, I'll get out of the office at 6. I'll drive home. I'll get here around 7 o'clock. From the time I left the office to the time I get home, maybe there'll be another 40 emails. Because during that time, Tokyo is waking up, and then we have Singapore, and then we have Hong Kong, and then all these other offices. So because we're a global institution, it just doesn't stop. And I guess it's something to be mindful. that it's a speed that it's a little faster than other development institutions, at least that I've worked at. But it's fun, and you have a team supporting you, so it's a great place to work. It's not very vertical, right? It's actually more horizontal. So if you have a good idea, you don't have to go through too many layers to get it approved and to take it with. As a matter of fact, they like people who have ideas. And for my own experience, when I first joined, I remember they asked me for a recruitment strategy. And I put together something that I showed to the manager, who then said, "Okay, great. I want you to show it to the director of the department." So right off the bat, they're already opening the doors for me to present to the director, who then said, "Great, Rudy. There's some VPs asking about this. Can you explain to the VPs?" So they open up the doors for that VP level, which are the management team, the decision makers. So and if you have a good idea, and by the way, he said, "Yeah, by the way, tell me what your budget is. What do you want, for this recruitment strategy?" So if you have a good idea, usually those get promoted, and there's a good environment for people to be able to develop themselves.
And on that very wonderful positive note, thank you, Rudy, for sharing all of your great wisdom and expertise with us. Thanks to all of you for being here at all different times around the world. I'm sure your inboxes are full of emails from Tokyo and Singapore and DC and Bogota and everywhere else. The recording will be available on the APSIA YouTube page, which you will receive a link to after this event. And we look forward to welcoming you to future APSIA webinars and seeing you at other events, and hopefully sending well-tailored, articulate, fabulous applications to the IFC in the future. So thank you everyone very much for all of your time and attention today. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Carmen.
Thank you, Rudy.